ovu sesiju. Izvolite. Ja.
I enjoy humanistic point of view of our young colleague. For example, the point of view about abort, the right of abort. But I like emancipated woman have a little different point of view. I want to have a right to make abortion. I know that this is some kind of murder, but for many reasons, I want to have this right. I want to say that life is more complicated, more cruel, etc. My report is about that. Education, religious opposition, and international conflicts. The cultivation of disrespect for different religious systems, of hatred for the people who profess them, is a means of softening people's negative attitude towards violence against religious minority groups. It is also a favorable condition for the approval and assistance of military conflicts. In Bulgaria, the socio-economic division between different strata after 1989 was supplemented by a deepening of their religious identifications. Christians are increasingly suspicious of Muslims and think of them all as terrorists. The religious people view the non-religious with suspicion, and depending on their religious color, they interpret many events: wars, terrorist acts, murders. Using religiosity as a means of controlling the masses has been a common behavior of the ruling classes and their elites throughout human history. This continues under capitalism, when the secularity of the state and social relations is declared as a principle, and religion is declared a personal right and an element of the personal life of every citizen. It is separated from secular education. But this principle, in different periods of the development of nations, is observed more or less depending on the needs of the different ruling classes and their elites. Religious differences are most exploited during domestic and international tensions and military conflicts. The basic rule is this: the worse the masses live, the more the elites use this tool to rule them, to ensure their political tranquility by redirecting social tensions and struggles. Expectations are redirected from the state to God, and responsibility is thought more from strata who are also victims of social relations, and not from those who are the cause of the unfortunate social situation of people dissatisfied with their social status. These satisfactions are directed instead at the ruling elite, which govern social development, to other strata affected by the particularities of development. For example, to refugees, to religious minorities. Hatreds between Christians and Muslims in Europe are growing due to the impoverishment of large groups of people of Christian orientation. The ruling elites direct their hatred towards refugees and immigrants, many of whom are Muslim and ready to work under less favorable conditions in all Europe. European elites quite consciously and consistently stimulate hatred towards Muslims, tolerate racist, neo-fascist attitudes and behaviors. No year. They refer the hatred not to employers who do not respect labor rights, do not pay adequately for the labor of large masses of people, replace human labor with machines, but to order victims of economic relations. The other object of hatred, which is quite consciously maintained in the public consciousness precisely as an object of hatred, are the refugees, especially when they are from a different religious denomination than the one dominant in Europe. Thus, the European elites cover up their guilt for the development of the refugee flows in question due to the aggression of the USA and European countries in many countries around the world. The use of religion as a meaningful tool was also present in the period from the end of the Second World War to 1989 in the so-called socialist countries, which are actually countries with state capitalism. The ruling nomenclature class developed the second stage of Bulgarian capitalist development, the stage of accelerated industrialization, since the pre-44 Bulgarian bourgeoisie failed to industrialize the country to a degree that would be sufficiently competitive with the more developed countries. Since the backlog had to be caught up in a short period of time, it was done with the help of an undemocratic political regime and a large percentage of state ownership and planning. In this stage, the ruling nomenclature used religiosity as a governing tool, but by reducing it, not by stimulating it, as the ruling elite does today. When the welfare of the masses gradually increased, this was an important condition for reducing tensions and hatreds, and the nomenclature needs the workforce of the entire population to carry out its historical mission and is interested in a greater degree of unity of the various strata of the non-elite. Atheism and the lack of religious education in school gives them a greater opportunity to increase this unity. Through this policy, differences, in this case religious differences, are minimized. To the extent that different religious denominations still exist, the nomenclature tries to minimize the differences between them, not deepen them. One of the means for this is the lesser importance of religious holidays in the country's official holiday system. As a result of the relatively more secular policies of the socialist nomenclature between 44 and 89, under so-called socialism, the holiday system is more secular in nature. Christian holidays are still present among the main state holidays, but their celebration does not dominate and does not emphasize the absence of Muslim holidays. Greater attention is paid to the celebration of secular holidays, which are to a greater extent common to all citizens. This affects the education system. It is a condition for increasing the tolerance of children and young people to the different religious attachments of those living in the country, as well to people outside the country. Before 89, there was no religious education in the secular school and in the secular higher education institutions. Religious education is separated into specialized educational institutions. In general, in economic and social ways, the standard of living of Muslims is raised, their discrimination as an ethnic and religious minority is reduced, and the absence of Muslim holidays in the official holiday system is experienced to a lesser extent as discrimination. Educating children and inculcating elders in a tolerant and non-discriminatory attitude towards other religions, especially toward Muslims, is a favorable basis for disapproving aggressive policy of the elites on the part of the masses. This stimulated mass support for the peace-loving policies of the nomenclatura throughout the period incorrectly called socialism. After 1989, when the standard of living of huge masses of people degraded, it became necessary for the elite to stimulate religiosity and superstition to direct passions in a safer direction. It directs the expectations of help of suffering people to God and turns them away from itself. He directs their sympathies and hopes to zodiac signs and soothsayers. A famous Bulgarian scientist says that in Bulgaria today there are probably more fortune tellers than scientists. People's misfortunes are explained by the placement of the stars belonging to one on another zodiac sign, etc. The peak of this regard was reached when, during the last presidential elections, one of the most widely read Bulgarian newspapers published information on the zodiac affiliation of the main candidates on two whole pages of the publication. Apparently, they are urging us to vote according to the zodiac sign of the candidates and not according to their political programs. After 1989, the rules in the Western countries, you say me?
Okay.
After the rulers in the Western countries lost their previous enemy in the face of the countries of the so-called socialist camp, and in turn looked for new variants of enemies in Islam, in refugees, and in terrorism. They formulated the struggle against them as vitally important and thus more easily manipulate their own peoples. The manipulation is extremely effective. Hatred grows and prevents the masses from seeing the real causes of the problems in their being. The number of groups persecuting refugees and Muslims on the streets of individual crimes is increasing. Muslims answer with act of terrorism, and the authority often cover up the former and are very precise in pursuing the latter and spreading negative information about them. Islamophobia effectively challenges the social and civil status of people who practice Islam and introduces various forms of discrimination, violence, stigmatization, and attempts for exclusion, both at the everyday and at the institutional level, centering on attempts to suggest that their religion is incompatible with liberal democratic principles. A report from the University of California, Berkeley, and the Council of American Islamic Relations estimated that 206 million was funded by 33 groups whose primary goal was to promote prejudice against Islam and Muslims in the United States between 8 and 13 years this century, with a total of 74 groups contributing to Islamophobia in the United States during this period. Newspaper articles, television shows, books, popular movies, political debates in the US, parts of Europe, and around the world vilify Islam in the dominant culture. Fundamentalism is almost automatically massively associated with Islam, despite its close and usually unspoken connection with Christianity, Judaism, and Hinduism. The deliberately created associations between Islam and fundamentalism ensure that the average reader will perceive Islam and fundamentalism as the same thing. Islam is reduced to a handful of rulers, stereotypes, and generalizations about the faith, reinforcing the negative image of this religion and missing the fact that only some group of Islamic share radical sentiments. After '89, the holiday system in Bulgaria and other former social countries supported the discrimination of Muslims. The main holidays are again the Christian religious holidays, despite the large percentage of Muslims among the population and the secular nation of the state. But unlike the time of socialism, these Christian religious holidays are celebrated much more actively, with the most holidays with the greatest respect from the media and the state. Muslim religious holidays are not in the general state holiday system. For example, Muslim students cannot go on their religious holiday to avoid missing classes. In other words, the holiday system respects religious holidays and those of the majority more. The privileged position of Christianity is firmly established in the Constitution. All this is a very serious line of discrimination against minority religious groups. They feel like second-hand people. This breeds feelings of inferiority and hatred towards non-Muslims and the state.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. In the countries of the former socialist camp, by their holiday system, one can understand what the religions are between religious communities. Where the Christian community is in clear majority, there are no official Muslim holidays at all in the holiday system. For example, in Bulgaria, Russia, Romania, Serbia, Poland. In some of these countries, religious holidays are proportionally and in terms of importance more important than secular holidays. Where the Muslim community is more equal in number, there is greater self-confidence and demands for equality are allowed among the many Christian holidays and some Muslim holidays, etc., etc. Thank you for your attention.
Hvala puno, Petja PACHKOVA. I imamo još jednog govornika u ovoj sesiji, to je naš kolega, tehnički direktor konferencije, Davor Šabarac, koji je student doktorskih studija na našem